The Auction of Worlds. The infinite bazaar stretched across 17 dimensions, a marketplace where civilizations bought and sold star systems like commodities. Kale Riversong stood in the human delegation's viewing pod, watching his species' future dissolve into static on the holographic displays. Lot 4872, the Sol System, announced the auctioneer, a crystalline entity named Prismera whose voice echoed through quantum frequencies. 13 planets, 1 yellow dwarf star, extensive asteroid fields. Current occupants, Homo sapiens Class 7 civilization. Opening bid, 40 million credits. Kale's jaw tightened. 40 million. For humanity's birthright. The VRWNN Collective's representative, Ambassador Thalxus, raised a tentacle lazily. 40 million. 50 million from the Kiloran Empire, chirped a bird-like delegate whose feathers shimmered with bioluminescence. Kale glanced at his companion, Dr. Asha Kamathi, humanity's chief sinologist. Her dark eyes reflected the same helpless rage he felt. Their entire species' net worth barely scratched 10 million credits. They weren't here to bid, they were here to witness their eviction. The Galactic Council had made its ruling 3 months ago. Humanity had failed the inheritance protocols. Every spacefaring species in the galaxy received a starter package when they achieved faster-than-light travel. Technology blueprints, resource grants, territorial rights. Except humans. The clause was buried in subsection 4193 of the protocols. Civilizations that achieved FTL through unorthodox means forfeited all inheritance rights. Humanity's crime? They'd figured it out themselves. While every other species received the FTL equations as part of their inheritance package, humans had independently derived the mathematics. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's revolutionary work on folded spacetime had made humanity's first warp drive possible. The Council called it a paradox. How could humans invent FTL without the FTL they were supposed to inherit? Their solution: strip humanity of all inheritance rights retroactively. 100 million. Thalxus's voice boomed. The bidding war escalated. The Sol System's value wasn't in its planets, it was in Earth's biosphere, a treasure trove of genetic diversity that pharmaceutical megacore would harvest for centuries. Going once, going twice. Prismera's facets rotated, refracting light into rainbow patterns. Wait. Kale's voice cut through the chamber. Thousands of alien eyes turned toward the human pod. Asha grabbed his arm. Kale, what are you doing? He shook her off, stepping forward. I invoke the right of contest. Silence crashed through the bazaar like a shockwave. Prismera's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been surprise. The right of contest has not been invoked in 47,000 years. But it's still valid, correct? Kale's heart hammered against his ribs. It is. Prismera's voice carried a note of curiosity. However, you must understand the terms. You would compete against the highest bidder in a trial by the Council's choosing. Victory grants your species full ownership of the contested lot. Defeat means termination of your species' legal existence. Gasps rippled through the assembled delegates. Asha yanked Kale back. Are you insane? You'll doom us all. We're already doomed, Kale hissed. In a year, humanity will be scattered across the galaxy as refugees. This is our only chance. The VRWNN delegate rose, his massive form towering over his podium. The VRWNN Collective accepts this challenge. Name your champion, human. Kale felt the weight of 11 billion souls pressing down on his shoulders. He thought of his daughter, Mira, playing in the parks of New Singapore. He thought of humanity's artists, scientists, dreamers, all about to become galactic footnotes. I am the champion, he said. Prismera's facets aligned. The trial shall be the labyrinth of lost heritages. A maze containing the inheritance packages of 17 extinct civilizations. The first to claim 3 packages and return to the starting point wins. The trial begins in 72 hours. As the chamber erupted in excited chatter, Asha pulled Kale aside. What just happened? I bought us time, Kale said. And a chance. Against the VRWNN? They're 8 feet tall with exoskeletons that can withstand plasma fire. You're a negotiator, Kale, not a warrior. Then I'll negotiate with the maze. He managed a grim smile. Besides, I have something the VRWNN don't. What? Desperation. And the knowledge that humans have always been good at one thing, surviving when everyone counts us out. As they left the bazaar, Kale didn't notice the figure watching from the shadows of a vendor's stall. Nix Valorum, an information broker of mysterious origin, smiled with too many teeth. Interesting, Nix whispered to no one. The hairless apes finally do something unexpected. This will be profitable. The countdown had begun. In 72 hours, either humanity would reclaim its birthright, or it would cease to exist as a legal entity in galactic law, scattered to the stellar winds, a species without a home. Kale Riversong had 3 days to prepare for the fight of his species' life. And he had no idea what he was walking into. The inheritance broker. The safe house orbited a neutron star in the Gehenna cluster, a location chosen specifically because most species found the radiation levels uncomfortable. For humans with proper shielding, it was just another Tuesday. Kale sat across from Nyx Valorum in a chamber that defied conventional geometry. The information broker looked vaguely humanoid, but their features shifted whenever Kale wasn't looking directly at them. A defense mechanism from a species that no longer existed. You need to understand what you've agreed to, Nyx said, projecting a hologram of the labyrinth. The structure rotated slowly, a nightmare of Escher-like architecture that hurt to observe. The labyrinth exists in 7 spatial dimensions simultaneously. Most species can only perceive 3, which is why they fail. How do I perceive 7 dimensions? Kale asked. Nyx's smile was predatory. You don't. You cheat. They tossed a small device onto the table. It looked like a silver marble with circuit patterns etched into its surface. A neural mapper, Nyx explained. It'll let your brain process information in ways it wasn't designed for. Side effects include headaches, temporary synesthesia, and the occasional existential crisis. But you'll be able to navigate spaces that would drive normal humans mad. Kale picked up the device. Why are you helping me? Because I'm betting on you. The odds are 5,000 to 1 against humanity. I've placed a substantial wager on those odds. Nyx leaned back. Also, I find the VRYNN insufferable. Watching Gormith Ironhide lose would be satisfying. Tell me about him. Nyx's form solidified into something more focused. Gormith is the VRYNN Collective's greatest seeker. He's completed 47 labyrinths across 12 different reality matrices. He's never lost. He's also ruthless. 3 of his competitors in previous trials died from accidents. Encouraging, Kale muttered. Asha burst into the room, followed by 2 other humans. Kale, I brought help. The first was a young woman with cybernetic eyes and arms covered in mathematical tattoos. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, she said. I invented the FTL drive that got us into this mess. Figured I should help get us out. The second was a grizzled man with a scar across his face and the bearing of a soldier. Commander Jax Morgan, formerly of the Mars Defense Fleet. If this labyrinth gets physical, you'll need someone who knows how to fight. Kale looked at Asha. The trial allows only 1 champion. The trial allows 1 champion to enter, Nyx corrected. It doesn't specify that the champion can't have advisors nearby. The labyrinth has observation chambers where your team can monitor your progress and communicate with you. They can't enter the labyrinth proper, but they can help you solve its puzzles. Yuki sat down, projecting her own set of equations into the air. I've been studying the labyrinth's architecture. It's not just a maze, it's a series of logic puzzles based on the mathematical principles of the civilizations whose inheritances are stored there. Each package is locked behind a puzzle that only someone who thinks like that civilization could solve. How do we solve puzzles designed by extinct civilizations we know nothing about? Kale asked. We learn fast, Yuki said. I've hacked into the Council's archives. I have cultural databases on all 17 civilizations. The question is, which 3 do we target? Nyx expanded the hologram, highlighting 3 sections of the labyrinth. The VRYNN will go for the obvious choices. The Korvathi warriors, the silicate mines, and the Phosphor Collective. Those packages contain advanced weapons and industrial tech. High-value, relatively straightforward puzzles. Then we go for different ones, Kale said. Smart, Nyx agreed. I recommend the Melodia Concordance, the Temporal Scribes, and the Void Painters. Lower value individually, but their technologies are unique. The Melodia could teach you to communicate across quantum states. The Scribes had limited time manipulation. The Painters could fold space in ways that make your current FTL look like a horse-drawn carriage. Jax frowned. Why hasn't anyone claimed these before? Because their puzzles are considered unsolvable by conventional thinking, Nyx said. The Melodious puzzle requires understanding music as a universal language. The Scribe's puzzle involves solving temporal paradoxes. The Painter's puzzle requires you to navigate a space where up, down, left, and right are subjective concepts. Impossible, Jax said. For most species, Yuki said, her eyes gleaming. But humans have something unique, We're pattern recognition machines. Our brains evolved to find meaning in chaos. We see faces in clouds, hear music in white noise, find order in randomness. It's what let us invent FTL without the formulas. It might be what saves us now. Kale stood, feeling the weight of decision settling on him. We have 68 hours before the trial. Yuki, I need you to teach me everything you can about those 3 civilizations. Jax, you're going to train me for combat. If I run into Gormith in the labyrinth, I need to survive long enough to run away. Asha, coordinate with Nyx. Get us every advantage we can find. And you? Asha asked. Kale held up the neural mapper. I'm going to teach my brain to think in 7 dimensions. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Nyx pulled Kale aside. One more thing. The labyrinth shows you things, visions of the extinct civilizations, echoes of their last moments. It's how it tests whether you're worthy of their inheritance. Most people break down. The VRYNN are immune because they have no empathy. And humans? You have too much empathy. It could destroy you or... Nyx's form flickered. Could be your greatest strength. The civilizations don't just want strong inheritors. They want worthy ones. As Kale inserted the neural mapper into the port at the base of his skull, reality began to fold in ways that made his teeth ache and his vision blur. The countdown continued. 68 hours until humanity's last chance. The training had begun. The trial begins. The labyrinth of lost heritages materialized in a pocket dimension accessible only through the Council's ceremonial portal. Kale stood at the entrance, his neural mapper humming softly against his skull. Through his augmented perception he could see the structure as it truly was, a crystalline maze that existed simultaneously in multiple realities. Behind him, in the observation chamber sealed by unbreakable force fields, his team watched through holographic displays. Millions across the galaxy tuned into the broadcast. The rite of contest drew audiences from every corner of known space. Gormith Ironhide stood at the opposite entrance, towering and terrible. The VRWNN warrior's exoskeleton gleamed with biometallic plates that had been hardened in the cores of dying stars. His 4 eyes fixed on Kale with the cold assessment of a predator sizing up prey. Prismar's voice resonated through the pocket dimension. The trial begins now. First to retrieve 3 inheritance packages and return to their starting point claims victory. There are no other rules. Survival is optional. The crystalline doors irised open. Kale ran. The labyrinth's first chamber was a gallery of frozen moments, holographic recreations of the 17 extinct civilizations in their final hours. Kale tried not to look, but the neural mapper forced him to process information from all directions simultaneously. The Korvathi warriors, consumed by a plague they'd engineered as a weapon that turned against them. The silicate minds, shattered when their collective consciousness fragmented into infinite, screaming shards. The Phosphor Collective, burned out when they tried to ascend to pure energy and discovered too late that consciousness needed matter to anchor it. Each death was a lesson. Each extinction a warning. Kale, focus. Asha's voice came through his comlink. The Melodia Concordance Chamber is 3 passages to your left, then up through what looks like a solid wall but registers as permeable in the 4th dimension. He followed her guidance, his altered perception letting him see the wall as it truly was, a membrane between dimensional layers. He pushed through, feeling reality stretch around him like passing through thick syrup. The Melodia Chamber was a sphere of absolute silence. At its center floated an orb that pulsed with inner light, the inheritance package. Around it, musical notations from 1,000 different species hung in the air like frozen starlight. The puzzle, Yuki's voice crackled through the comm, the Melodia communicated entirely through music. Their language, their mathematics, their entire civilization was sonic. You need to find the song that unlocks the package. Kale walked to the center of the sphere. The moment he entered, sound hit him like a physical force. Not random noise, patterns. Rhythms. Melodies from creatures whose vocal ranges spanned frequencies humans couldn't normally hear. But the neural mapper let him hear everything. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrible chaos. There are 17 million possible combinations, Yuki said, her voice tight with stress. Even with quantum processing, I can't narrow it down faster than... Wait, Kale said. He closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. It's not about finding the right song. It's about understanding what they were trying to say. He listened. Really listened. Beneath the cacophony he heard patterns that repeated. Mathematical ratios. The golden mean. Fibonacci sequences embedded in alien scales. And something else. Something that made his breath catch. Grief. Every song in the chamber carried the same emotional weight. The Melodia hadn't died suddenly, they'd known it was coming. This chamber was their memorial, their final message to the universe. Cale began to hum. Not a melody from any human culture but something new, a harmony that bridged the gaps between all the songs around him. He wove together fragments of Melodia compositions, finding the common threads that connected them. The sphere responded. The floating notations began to orbit around him faster and faster, until they blurred into a single sustained note that resonated through his bones. The orb opened. The inheritance package downloaded directly into his neural mapper. Suddenly, Cale understood communication in ways humanity never had. He could feel the quantum states of particles around him, sense their vibrational signatures. With practice, humans could talk to anyone, anything, even species that communicated through radio waves or gravitational fluctuations. Package 1 secured, he gasped. Moving to the temporal scribes. Negative, Jax's voice cut in. Gormith just claimed his second package. He's heading toward the Void Painters, your third target. If he gets there first, you won't have enough packages to win. Cale swore. How did he get to so fast? Brute force. Nyx's voice joined the comm. He's solving the puzzles by destroying them. The Korvathi package required demonstrating warrior prowess. He killed the Guardian constructs. The Silicate mines required logical processing. He uploaded a war AI to solve it. He's not worthy of those inheritances, but the labyrinth accepts victory by any means. Can I reach the Void Painters first? Yuki's fingers flew over holographic keyboards. If you take the direct route, no. But if you cut through the quantum abyss, a section of the labyrinth that exists in superposition, you might make it. Problem is, the abyss is considered unsurvivable. Matter breaks down into probability clouds. The neural mapper can handle it, Cale said, already running toward the coordinates Yuki fed him. Cale, wait, Asha started. But he was already diving into the abyss. Reality dissolved. Cale felt his body separate into quantum possibilities. He was simultaneously in 1,000 places, 1,000,000 states of being. He was alive and dead, matter and energy, wave and particle. The neural mapper screamed warning sirens in his skull, but it held. Barely. He focused on the Melodia inheritance, using its quantum communication protocols to navigate the probability storm. He collapsed his wave function deliberately, choosing which reality to exist in with each thought. He emerged on the other side gasping, his nose bleeding from the strain. The Void Painter's chamber lay ahead. So did Gormith Ironhide, his massive form already reaching for the inheritance package suspended in a space where geometry was a suggestion rather than a rule. Their eyes met across impossible distance. The VRWNN warrior smiled. Too slow, human. The void between stars. The Void Painter's chamber existed in a space where perspective was meaningless. What appeared to be floor might be ceiling depending on which direction Cale oriented his consciousness. Walls curved into themselves, creating impossible architectures that would drive an unaugmented mind to madness. Gormith moved through it as if following a predetermined path, his four eyes seeing patterns that Cale's three-dimensional thinking couldn't grasp. The Void Painters, Yuki's voice came through strained with urgency, created their art by folding space itself. Their inheritance isn't just faster than light travel, it's the ability to make distance meaningless. To reach the package, you have to paint your own path through the void. Cale watched Gormith extend one massive arm toward the floating inheritance package. But the VRWNN's hand never reached it. Space itself bent around the orb, making it perpetually unreachable by linear movement. You cannot claim what you cannot understand, Cale called out, his voice echoing through twisted dimensions. Gormith's laugh was like grinding stone. I don't need to understand, human. I need only to possess. He pulled a device from his armor, a reality anchor used by the VRWNN military to stabilize wormholes. He's going to force the space to flatten, Nyx warned. It's crude but it'll work. The labyrinth will accept it. Cale felt panic claw at his throat. But then the Melodia inheritance pulsed in his neural mapper, and he understood something crucial. The Void Painters didn't just manipulate space, they communicated through it. Their art was their language. He closed his eyes and began to paint. Not with hands or tools but with thought and will. The neural mapper translated his intentions into spatial manipulations. He imagined colors that didn't exist in normal space, hues that represented compressed dimensions, shades that meant here is also there. The chamber responded. Space began to fold around Cale like origami made of reality itself. He wasn't moving toward the package. He was bringing the package's location to himself by eliminating the space between them. Gormith snarled, activating his reality anchor. The device hummed, trying to force the chamber into a stable configuration. But Kale's painting was already complete. He stood simultaneously in two places, at the entrance and at the center. The package floated within arm's reach, while he remained exactly where he'd started. A paradox that the void painters would have called a masterpiece. He grasped the orb. Knowledge flooded his mind. Not just equations but an entirely new way of thinking about existence. Space wasn't a container that held things, it was a relationship between things. Change the relationship, change the space. Gormith roared, lunging forward. His reality anchor pulsed at maximum power, shattering Kale's painted pathways. The VONN's massive form crossed the chamber in seconds. But Kale was already gone, having folded himself through a shortcut he'd created, collapsing the distance between the chamber and the exit into nothing. 2 packages, he gasped, stumbling into a corridor that at least pretended to follow normal physics. I need one more. Gormith has 3, Jax reported grimly. He claimed the Phosphor Collective while you were in the void. He's heading back to his starting point. If he gets there first, it's over. Kale checked his internal map. The temporal scribe's chamber was closest, but Gormith's route back would take him past it. They'd meet there. Asha, Kale said, running full sprint toward the chamber, the temporal scribes. What's their puzzle? According to the archives, they had limited time manipulation technology. They could see possible futures and past timelines. Their puzzle is... Asha's voice trailed off. Oh no. What? The puzzle is surviving a temporal paradox. You have to prevent your own past self from entering the chamber while your future self claims the package. If you succeed, you create a paradox. You claim the package without ever entering. If you fail, you cease to exist across all timelines. That's insane, Kale breathed. Yuki's voice was thoughtful. Actually, it's elegant. The scribes wanted their inheritors to understand that time isn't a line, it's a web of possibilities. You have to choose which timeline becomes real. Kale reached the chamber entrance. It was a perfect sphere of mirrored surfaces, reflecting infinite versions of himself from infinite possible timelines. At the center hung the final package, pulsing with temporal energy that made his head ache. Heavy footsteps echoed behind him. Gormith approaching fast. No time for subtlety, Kale muttered, diving into the chamber. The moment he crossed the threshold, he saw himself, or rather, thousands of versions of himself. Some succeeded and left with the package. Some failed and vanished, erased from causality. Some never entered at all. The neural mapper struggled to process the temporal noise. Kale felt his consciousness fracturing across multiple timelines, experiencing different outcomes simultaneously. In one timeline he grabbed the package and ran. Gormith caught him, crushing his skull. In another he hid, waiting for Gormith to leave. But without the package, humanity lost. In a third he confronted Gormith directly. The fight lasted 3 seconds. Stop. Yuki's voice cut through the temporal chaos. You're thinking linearly. The scribes didn't want you to prevent paradoxes, they wanted you to embrace them. The puzzle isn't about choosing one timeline. It's about making all timelines true simultaneously. Kale's mind reeled. How? Quantum superposition. You exist in all timelines at once until observation collapses the wave function. What if you never collapse it? What if you stay in superposition, being both the Kale who gets the package and the Kale who doesn't, until you choose which reality becomes fixed? It was madness. It violated everything humans understood about causality. It was also his only chance. Kale stopped trying to choose. He let himself exist in all states, success and failure, presence and absence, action and inaction. The neural mapper shrieked warnings, but he pushed it further than it was designed to go. Gormith burst into the chamber, his reality anchor blazing. But Kale was already everywhere and nowhere. He was the version grabbing the package while simultaneously being the version who never entered. He was fighting Gormith while also fleeing. He was all possibilities at once. The chamber screamed, unable to resolve the paradox. And then Kale understood the final truth. He chose. Not one timeline but the truth that served humanity. He collapsed the wave function deliberately, making real the timeline where he'd claimed the package 3 seconds before Gormith arrived. A past that hadn't existed until he chose to make it so. Reality snapped into place. Kale stood at the chamber's exit, the third package in his hands, while Gormith materialized inside the chamber, looking around in confusion. Impossible, the VRWNN growled. I saw you enter after me. You saw one possibility, Kale said, already running. I chose a different one. The race was on. Both competitors had 3 packages. The first back to their starting point would win. And Gormith was faster. But Kale had the Void Painter's inheritance. Distance was now a suggestion, not a rule. He painted a path through space itself, folding the corridors like paper. Behind him, Gormith's roar shook the labyrinth's foundations. The exit portal gleamed ahead. So did Gormith, having taken a more direct route. They would reach it at the same moment. The worthy inheritor. Time seemed to freeze as both Kale and Gormith lunged for their respective exit portals. The observation chambers erupted in chaos. Millions of beings across the galaxy watched humanity's fate balance on a knife's edge. Then Gormith stumbled. It was subtle, barely noticeable. His left leg buckled for a fraction of a second. But at the speed they were moving, a fraction was everything. Kale crossed his threshold first. Prismar's voice resonated through the labyrinth. Kale, Riversong of humanity has claimed victory. The Sol system returns to human sovereignty. The observation chamber exploded with sound as Kale collapsed to his knees, packages clutched against his chest. Asha and Yuki rushed to him, while Jax kept a wary eye on the VRNN delegation's pod. Gormith emerged from his portal 3 seconds later, his expression unreadable behind his exoskeleton. For a moment, Kale feared the VRNN would challenge the ruling, perhaps claim interference. Instead, Gormith approached Kale's pod. The massive warrior stood before the human, towering over him even as Kale struggled to his feet. "You fought with honor," Gormith said, his voice like distant thunder. "The VRNN collective accepts defeat." He extended one massive hand. Kale, barely able to stand, clasped it. As the bazaar erupted in mixed reactions, some species cheering, others grumbling about lost bets, Nyx materialized beside Kale with a satisfied smile. "Congratulations. You've just made me extraordinarily wealthy." The information broker transferred a data chip to Kale's hand. "Your winnings? 10% of my take as promised." Kale stared at the chip. "This shows 400 million credits. You bet on me? I bet on your species' remarkable talent for doing the impossible when everyone counts you out." Nyx's form flickered. "Also, I may have helped ensure Gormith's stumble. A small gravitational anomaly in his path, completely undetectable and technically not against the rules." Before Kale could respond, Prismera interrupted. "The inheritance packages must now be transferred to humanity's possession." Kale Riversong approach. Kale walked to the center of the ceremonial platform, the 3 orbs floating before him. The neural mapper had shown him glimpses of what they contained, but now, as Prismera began the formal transfer, the full weight of the knowledge crashed over him. The Melodia Concordance's gift. Humanity could now communicate across quantum states, talk to species whose languages had seemed incomprehensible, even dialogue with artificial intelligences and potentially with the universe itself. The Void Painter's gift. Space-folding technology that would let human ships cross the galaxy in heartbeats, make distance irrelevant, and open up regions of space unreachable by conventional FTL. The Temporal Scribe's gift. Limited time perception, the ability to see probability clouds of future events, not to change destiny but to make better choices with foreknowledge of consequences. "These inheritances," Prismera said, "are now humanity's birthright. But know this, the civilizations who created them all shared one fate. They destroyed themselves. The Melodia grew so connected they lost individual identity and faded into static. The Void Painters folded themselves into a space from which they could never return. The Temporal Scribes saw so many futures they became paralyzed, unable to choose any path, and starved while contemplating infinite possibilities. The crystalline entity's facets aligned to focus on Kale. These are not gifts. They are warnings. Can humanity succeed where others failed? Kale thought of Mira, of Earth's billions, of the colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. He thought of humanity's history, countless civilizations that had risen and fallen, but always, there were survivors who learned, adapted, and built something new from the ruins. "We don't know," Kale said honestly. "But we'll try. And if we fail, we'll fail trying to be worthy of what we've inherited." Prismera's light pulsed with what might have been approval. "Then take these gifts, Kale Riversong. Take them with the understanding that inheritance is not ownership, it is responsibility." The packages dissolved, their knowledge flooding into Kale's neural mapper. He would need months to fully parse it, years to help humanity implement it safely. But they had time now. They had a future. As the ceremony concluded and the delegates began to disperse, a new voice cut through the celebration. It was cold, mechanical, and filled with contempt. "I protest this ruling." A figure emerged from the shadows of the bazaar. a construct of living metal and dark matter, its form shifting between solid and ethereal. The Architect Collective, a civilization of post-biological entities who had transcended physical form. Their representative, known only as Axiom, pointed an appendage at Kale. The human cheated. He used a neural mapper to augment his consciousness beyond natural capacity. This is explicitly forbidden under the Inheritance Protocols, subsection 8456. The crowd fell silent. Asha's hand gripped Kale's arm like a vice. Prismar's facets rotated thoughtfully. The protocols forbid genetic modification and cybernetic augmentation that fundamentally alter a competitor's species classification. Does a neural mapper constitute such a modification? It does, Axiom stated flatly. The device allowed the human to process information in ways Homo sapiens cannot naturally achieve. This is cheating. Kale's heart sank. They'd won only to have victory snatched away by a technicality. But then Gormith Ironhide stepped forward. I also used augmentation, the VRWNN warrior announced. My exoskeleton is grafted to my nervous system, enhancing my strength and durability beyond natural VRWNN capacity. My optical implants allow me to see in 17 electromagnetic spectrums. If the human is disqualified for augmentation, so must I be. Axiom's form rippled with irritation. That is different. Your augmentations are standard among your species. They were not always so, Gormith interrupted. The VRWNN were once fragile creatures easily broken. We augmented ourselves to survive. Humanity does the same. To deny them, this is to deny the fundamental right of all species to evolve and adapt. Other voices joined in. The Keloran delegate, the crystalline entities of the Harmony Sphere, even some of the Architect Collective's own members spoke against Axiom's protest. Prismar's decision was final. The protest is denied. Augmentation in pursuit of survival and advancement is not cheating, it is the essence of all intelligent life. Humanity's victory stands. Axiom's form darkened with rage, but the construct said nothing more, dissolving into shadow and vanishing from the bazaar. As the tension broke and celebration resumed, Kale approached Gormith. Why? He asked simply. You could have won by disqualifying me. Gormith's 4 eyes met his. Because you were worthy. The labyrinth showed me the truth. Humans inherit nothing because you create everything. You don't need gifts from the past. You build your own future. The warrior's tone softened slightly. Besides, watching the Architect Collective lose is more satisfying than any victory over you could have been. He turned to leave, then paused. Your species will need allies in the days to come. The VRWNN Collective offers friendship if you will accept it. Kale extended his hand again. Accepted. As Gormith departed, Yuki approached with holographic projections dancing around her. Kale, I've been analyzing the packages. The knowledge contained in them, it's going to change everything. But we need to be careful. Really careful. Show me, Kale said. What Yuki revealed made his blood run cold. The inheritances weren't just technology, they were sealed within layers of encryption and safeguards. And buried deep in each package was a message from the extinct civilizations. A warning. They're not just gifts, Yuki whispered. They're tests. And if we fail them, we become extinct too, Kale finished. The celebration continued around them, but Kale felt the weight of a new burden settling on his shoulders. They'd won humanity's future, but now they had to prove they deserved it. The hidden price. 3 weeks after the trial, Kale stood in the secure research facility beneath New Singapore, watching humanity's brightest minds struggle with their inheritance. The chamber was a masterwork of human engineering, combining quantum computing arrays with neural mapping stations. Around the room, scientists, linguists, and engineers worked frantically to decode the inheritance packages. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood at the central console, her cybernetic eyes flickering rapidly as she processed data streams. It's worse than we thought, she said without preamble. Each inheritance is locked behind a progressive series of tests. We can't just download the knowledge, we have to prove we understand it at each stage or the whole thing corrupts and becomes unusable. How many stages? Kale asked. For the Melodia? 17. For the Void Painters? 23. The Temporal Scribes. Yuki's voice faltered. 37 stages, each one more complex than the last. Asha joined them, her face drawn with exhaustion. We've been working on the first stage of the Melodia inheritance for 2 weeks. It's a linguistic puzzle that requires us to demonstrate we can communicate with species that perceive sound as color and color as taste. We've only just cracked it. And we're the fast ones, added Dr. Marcus Chin, head of the Quantum Physics Division. The Void Painter's first test requires us to fold a 10-dimensional object into 3-dimensional space without losing any information. We don't even have the mathematical framework to approach that problem. Kale felt frustration building. Why? Why make it so difficult? Because they wanted to ensure their inheritors were worthy, said a new voice. Everyone turned. Nix Valorum stood in the doorway, their form more stable than usual, suggesting the seriousness of their visit. I've been researching the extinct civilizations, Nix continued, walking into the chamber. Each one left behind archives, final messages. They all say the same thing: we became arrogant. We stopped questioning, stopped learning, and our gifts became crutches that crippled us. Nix projected a hologram, the last transmission from the Melodia Concordance. Kale watched as beings of pure harmonic energy sang their farewell to the universe. Their voices were hauntingly beautiful, but beneath the beauty was despair. They achieved perfect communication, Nix narrated. They could share thoughts, emotions, experiences instantly across their entire civilization. But in doing so, they lost the ability to be individuals. Every Melodia became part of a chorus so unified that individual voices ceased to exist. They didn't die, they dissolved into each other, becoming static noise in the cosmic background. Another hologram appeared, the Void Painter's last moments. Kale saw artists folding space into impossible sculptures, making reality itself their canvas. But each painting pulled them deeper into the dimensions they'd mastered, until they slipped through the cracks between spaces and vanished from existence entirely. And the temporal scribes? Yuki asked quietly. The final hologram showed beings sitting motionless, their eyes reflecting infinite timelines. They starved to death while contemplating every possible future, unable to choose any single path forward because they could see all the ways each choice might fail. These tests, Nix said, are designed to ensure you don't repeat their mistakes. You can't just take the technology, you have to understand the philosophy, the wisdom, and the warnings behind it. Commander Jax Morgan, who'd been observing from the back of the room, spoke up. So we're supposed to solve puzzles that civilizations more advanced than us created, while avoiding the exact pitfalls that destroyed those civilizations. That's impossible. For most species, yes, Nix agreed. That's why these inheritances have remained unclaimed for millennia. But humans? The information broker's form flickered with something that might have been hope. Humans have a unique advantage. What? Kale asked. You're stubborn. Nix smiled. And more importantly, you're diverse. The Melodia all thought alike. The Void Painters all pursued the same aesthetic. The temporal scribes all valued the same kind of knowledge. But humanity? You can't agree on anything. You have 7 billion individuals with 7 billion different perspectives. Yuki's eyes widened. That's it. The tests aren't meant to be solved by a single person or even a single culture. They're meant to be solved by a species that embraces diversity of thought. She turned to her team. We've been approaching this wrong. We've been trying to find the one correct answer. But what if there are multiple valid solutions, each requiring a different way of thinking? Marcus Chen pulled up the Void Painter's test. A 10-dimensional object folded into 3 dimensions. What if we don't solve it mathematically? What if we approach it artistically, intuitively, the way the painters themselves would have? And the Melodia test, Asha added, excitement creeping into her voice. We need linguists, yes, but also musicians, psychologists, people who understand communication in different ways. The room erupted into activity. Scientists who'd been working in isolation began collaborating across disciplines. Artists consulted with physicists. Philosophers debated with engineers. Kale watched the transformation and felt hope kindle in his chest. But Nix pulled him aside, their expression grave. There's something else you need to know. Something I discovered in my research. They led Kale to a private chamber and sealed the door behind them. The Architect Collective's protest wasn't random, Nix said. Axiom and their faction believe humanity doesn't deserve these inheritances. More than that, they believe humanity is dangerous. Why? Because you did something no other species has done. You invented FTL independently. Every other civilization received it as part of their inheritance package. But you? Nix's form pulsed. You created it from nothing but mathematics and determination. That terrifies the old powers. Kale frowned. Why should our innovation frighten them? Because it suggests humanity doesn't need inheritances at all. That you can create anything the ancient civilizations did, given enough time. And if that's true, if humans can reach the same heights through their own ingenuity. Nix paused. Then what becomes of the existing power structure? Of civilizations that define themselves by technologies they inherited rather than invented? The implications hit Kale like a physical blow. They see us as a threat to the entire galactic order. Not all of them. Gormith and the VRWN see you as potential allies. The Kiloran Empire is intrigued. But the Architect Collective, the hierarchs of the Stellar Core, the eternal bureaucracy, they've built their civilizations on inherited knowledge. They're terrified of a species that creates its own. What are they going to do? Nyx's form darkened. They're going to ensure you fail the test. Not obviously, that would violate council law. But there are ways to sabotage a civilization without directly attacking it. As if summoning doom through prophecy, alarms blared throughout the facility. Kale and Nyx rushed back to the main chamber to find chaos. The quantum computing arrays were overheating, spitting sparks and smoke. Scientists scrambled to shut down systems before they melted. What happened? Kale demanded. Yuki stared at her console in disbelief. Someone uploaded a virus into our network. It's designed to corrupt the inheritance data, making it impossible to decode. Who? The signature is masked, but the coding style. Marcus's face went pale. It's Architect technology. They attacked us. Can we stop it? We're trying, but the virus is adaptive. It's learning our countermeasures faster than we can deploy them. Kale watched humanity's future being deleted in real time, feeling helpless rage build in his chest. Then Yuki's eyes lit up. Wait. The virus is adapted to fight conventional cybersecurity. But what if we don't fight it conventionally? She pulled up the partially decoded Melodia inheritance. The Melodia communicated through harmonic frequencies. What if we translate our defense protocols into sound, into music? The virus won't know how to adapt to attacks it can't parse as data. It was insane. It was brilliant. Do it, Kale ordered. Yuki's fingers flew across holographic keyboards, transforming firewall algorithms into musical compositions. The facility's speakers began to emit strange, haunting melodies, cybersecurity encoded as symphony. The virus faltered, its adaptive algorithms confused by this new form of attack. It's working, Marcus shouted. The corruption is slowing. But then the virus adapted again, beginning to parse the musical patterns. We need something it can't predict, Asha said. Something random, chaotic, but still functional. Kale had an idea. Play them jazz. What? Jazz. The essence of jazz is controlled improvisation. Structure and chaos working together. The virus can't predict improvisation because there's nothing to predict. Yuki stared at him for a heartbeat, then grinned. She uploaded every jazz composition in Earth's musical database and wove them into the defensive protocols. The virus shattered like glass. The new inheritance. 6 months after defeating the virus, Kale stood on the observation deck of humanity's first void ship, a vessel built using the partially decoded Void Painter's inheritance. The ship didn't travel through space, it folded space around itself, making journeys that would take years occur in moments. They called it the Renaissance. Status report, Kale said into his comm. Yuki's voice came back, tinged with excitement. We've successfully decoded 40% of the Melodia inheritance, 65% of the Void Painters, and 30% of the Temporal Scribes. More importantly, we've done it without losing ourselves in the process. That was the real victory. Humanity had learned to use the inheritances carefully, understanding that each technology came with a philosophical framework that had to be respected. The Melodia's quantum communication had revolutionized human society, but humans maintained individual identity by establishing quiet zones, periods where people disconnected from the network to remember what it meant to be alone with one's thoughts. The Void Painter's space-folding technology opened the galaxy, but humans instituted mandatory waiting periods between jumps, ensuring they didn't become so disconnected from distance that they forgot the value of the journey. And the Temporal Scribe's probability viewing was used sparingly, consulted only for major decisions, because humans had learned that knowing every possible future could paralyze the present. Captain Riversong, Jax called from the tactical station. We're approaching the coordinates. You're going to want to see this. Kale moved to the main viewport as the Renaissance dropped out of its void fold. Before them floated a structure that defied comprehension. A space station the size of a moon, constructed from materials that seemed to exist in multiple states of matter simultaneously. What is that? Asha breathed. Nyx Valorum materialized beside them. That is the archive of the unspoken. A repository of knowledge from civilizations that went extinct before the current galactic order. It's been sealed for 50,000 years. Why are we here? Because you've proven yourselves. Nix gestured to the massive structure. The Galactic Council has granted humanity access. You're the first species in millennia to pass the inheritance tests far enough to earn this privilege. As they approached, Kale noticed other ships arriving, VRNN vessels, Kiloran frigates, even a few architect constructs. We're not alone, he observed. No, Nix confirmed. Word of humanity's success has spread. Other species want to see how you did it, learn from your methods. You started something, Kale. A renaissance of learning and questioning that the galaxy hasn't seen in eons. The Renaissance docked with the archive and Kale led a team inside. The interior was vast beyond measurement, with corridors that seemed to lead to impossible places. But unlike the labyrinth, this space felt welcoming, eager to share its secrets. At the archive's heart, they found a chamber containing holographic recordings from civilizations whose names had been forgotten by history. And at the center of the chamber stood a figure, or rather, a projection of one. It was humanoid but clearly not human, with features that suggested a common ancestor from billions of years past. Greetings, inheritors, the figure said. I am the Keeper, the last remnant of the first civilization, the species that seeded life throughout this galaxy. Kale's team stood in stunned silence. You're wondering why you were denied your inheritance, the Keeper continued. The truth is, you were never meant to have one. Why? Kale managed to ask. Because you are different. Every other spacefaring species we seeded received genetic coding that would guide them toward certain technological developments. They were designed to eventually receive FTL as an inheritance because we programmed them to need it. The Keeper's form shifted, showing images of DNA helixes with marked sections. But humanity developed a genetic mutation approximately 70,000 years ago, a random chance that removed our programming. You became truly independent, capable of creating rather than merely inheriting. The Toba catastrophe, Yuki whispered. The volcanic eruption that nearly wiped out our species. It created a genetic bottleneck that freed you, the Keeper finished. You became the first truly independent species since we died out. That's why the inheritance protocols didn't know what to do with you. You broke the system. So we inherit nothing because we need nothing, Kale said slowly. No, the Keeper corrected. You inherit nothing because you create everything. That is the greatest inheritance possible, the freedom to determine your own future. The hologram expanded, showing the galaxy in all its vastness. Other species have begun to notice. Some, like the VRYNN and the Kiloran, admire you. Others, like the Architect Collective, fear you. But all of them are watching to see what humanity becomes. What happened to your civilization? Asha asked. The first ones. The Keeper's form dimmed with ancient sadness. We became so perfect at creating life, so skilled at engineering species, that we forgot to evolve ourselves. We stagnated, and stagnation is death. That's why we seeded the galaxy, hoping that our children would succeed where we failed. And now one of your children has broken free of your design, Kale said. Yes, and that gives me hope. Not for my kind, we're long gone. But for the galaxy itself. The Keeper's form began to fade. Use your freedom wisely, humans. Create wonders we could never imagine. Make mistakes we never made. And perhaps someday seed your own gardens among the stars. The hologram vanished, leaving Kale's team alone in the chamber. But the archive itself came alive around them, its corridors illuminating with welcoming light. Knowledge from thousands of extinct civilizations became accessible, not as inheritance to be claimed, but as lessons to be learned from. Over the following weeks, human scientists worked alongside VRYNN engineers, Kiloran artists, and even some architect scholars who had broken from their collective to pursue independent thought. The archive became a center of collaborative learning with humanity at its heart, not as conquerors or inheritors, but as teachers showing others that it was possible to create rather than merely inherit. 3 years later, Kale stood in the same chamber where he'd first invoked the right of contest. But this time he wasn't fighting for humanity's survival. He was presenting humanity's first independent creation to the Galactic Council. It was a technology that combined human engineering with Melodia philosophy, void painter aesthetics, and temporal scribe wisdom, but synthesized into something entirely new. A quantum network that allowed civilizations to share knowledge while maintaining their distinct identities, a communication system that bridged cultures without erasing them. We call it the chorus of voices, Kale explained to the assembled delegates. Each species maintains their unique perspective, but together, we create harmonies greater than any single voice could achieve alone. Prismarous facets aligned in a pattern that suggested approval. You have learned well, humanity. The extinct civilizations would be proud. But it was Gormith Ironhide's words that meant the most to Kale. The Vrwenen warrior stood and spoke with conviction that resonated through the chamber. Humanity has shown us that inheritance is not destiny. That we are not defined by what we receive, but by what we create. His four eyes met Kale's. The Vrwenen Collective proposes that humanity be granted a seat on the Galactic Council, not as junior members, but as full partners in shaping our collective future. The vote was not unanimous. Some civilizations still feared what humanity represented. But it passed. As Kale accepted the council seat on behalf of his species, he thought about the journey that had brought them here. They'd started with nothing, facing extinction and erasure. They'd fought for survival, learned from the past, and created a future that honored both their independence and their connections to others. Years later, when Kale finally retired and returned to Earth, he found his daughter Mira leading a research team working on the next generation of human innovation. She was 25 now, brilliant and fierce, surrounded by colleagues from a dozen different species. "Dad," she said, hugging him tight. "You need to see what we've created." She showed him designs for a new kind of inheritance, not technology or knowledge, but a framework for cooperation that allowed species to share discoveries while encouraging each to develop their unique perspectives. "It's not about inheriting or creating alone," Mira explained. "It's about understanding that the best future is one we build together, where each voice matters." Kale looked at his daughter and saw the future of not just humanity, but of all species willing to embrace both their independence and their interdependence. "That," he said softly, "is the inheritance worth leaving behind." 50 years after the trial, humanity had not just survived, they had thrived. Not by inheriting the past but by creating the future. And in doing so, they had shown the galaxy that the greatest inheritance any species could receive was the freedom to become what they chose to be. The title "humans inherit nothing" had once been a curse. Humanity had transformed it into a blessing. And the galaxy would never be the same. The end. Epilogue. A message from the future. 200 years after Kale Riversong's victory, a young human named Zara Novak stood in the archive of the unspoken, now expanded 1,000-fold by contributions from hundreds of species. She was recording her doctoral thesis on the transformation of galactic society, and her final words would echo across the stars. "Our ancestors inherited nothing and in doing so inherited everything that mattered, the right to create, to choose, to become. We took that right and shared it with the galaxy not as conquerors but as partners." Today, 17 species have broken free from their inherited programming to pursue independent innovation. 43 civilizations have adopted the chorus of voices, creating a network of collaboration that respects individuality while celebrating unity. And humanity? We continue to create, to question, to reach for impossibilities and make them real. We inherited nothing. We created everything. And we're just getting started.